So I'm sorry if the lighting is not great.
You're
Like
out
I
of the
said,
house.
I'm sorry.
You're out of the house. You're in
Yeah, I'm out of the house. Up north.
hmm
I came back to join my family on vacation.
right.
Uh, it's been 2 weeks. I know you've been very busy. So what's been going on? Everything okay with work?
Yeah, yeah. It's just been work has been busy, and I'm moving at the end of the month to not too far, but still lots of stuff to do. So
Didn't you just move?
I did just move last year. A year ago, I moved to Austin, and now I'm moving inside of Austin to another place.
Aha, I got you.
Yeah, a lot of moving in my life recently,
Sorry
but
about that.
not for bad reasons. So. Mhm.
Um, let's say there. Okay. So we finished the intro last week. We basically we finished chapter one, Pirkei
Mhm.
Avot. We said we were going to.
We
Learning
lost you there.
I'm sorry.
I just lost you there. I think their
Okay.
connection.
Is my connection currently is full, but it could be that it's still.
No, yeah, usually it's okay. It was just that moment.
Okay, if it happens again, I'll shut off my camera.
Okay.
Um, so we said we were gonna finish off the first chapter
hmm
with just a little comparison between Maimonides and the Kabbalist, because obviously him as a rationalist he thinks very different. And while this specific class is really Maimonides' focus, we can't help but still
Right.
sprinkle some of the new things we've learned since
Yeah.
900 years.
hmm
So we have here our little AI summary. Um,
Okay.
I added one thing that I thought it was two things I thought it was missing that I thought were relevant to still add. But take it away.
So you want to read through this?
Yeah. I would just say let's do a quick read. There's like a lot we discussed in that class, so
Mhm.
just to get us like sort of back into focus, and we'll continue.
Right. Okay. So the first chapter touches on the human nefesh, the soul, as Maimonides talks about it, and explores this concept of the soul or a life force, and it represents the vitality that animates a living being, also linked to uh, breathing and life itself, neshama, maybe more breathing.
Right.
Yeah. So the key points here are the idea of this life force and how it breathes life into a person. That there are different levels of the soul. Well, in Jewish mysticism, there's different levels. I know that my
Right.
mind, like that's one of the differences, right? He doesn't see it as the soul is still united, or it is in full unity. We might talk about different aspects of it when we say levels. Um, so that's something to talk about. And then the biblical usage, nefesh comes up in Genesis. And then in terms of a broad meaning, it can include the emotions, a person's emotions, desires, moral character, and also the physical characteristics as well.
Correct.
I'm trying to kind of like
Remind
correct it,
yourself.
or yeah, as I go through it.
Well,
So
that was just because we're throwing out a term called nefesh, right? It
mhm,
starts with nefesh adam echad. Like, what does this term nefesh mean? So we know Maimonides, but you were just giving like a little breakdown of like what this term generally means in Judaism.
mhm. So a few concepts and functions of the nefesh that we spoke about: the oneness of the nefesh, of the soul, and this is something that the Rambam really dwells on. Um, the idea of
Specifically, like he says over here, because the moral accountability, right? If I have a split nefesh, then like
right,
the person that mugged you was just my angry nefesh, but like I did nothing, right? And obviously, you are a complete person, even though there's different aspects of you that we will obviously explore. Nevertheless, I still have to be able to have a moral accountability.
right. Um, Also, the concept of free will. I think we touched it with this discussed more deeply in later chapters as well, but talking about how that is essential for more responsibility. So that's connected to the point Chezi just made. In terms of functions of the soul, eating and loving, like the soul interacts with our physical actions and thoughts and feelings. So all of those are connected. And medical perspective, Rambam discusses different aspects of the soul according to Galen's categories: someach, chioni, sichli, so natural, vital, and rational.
Right. This was just then when he says Rosh Kol HaRofim, right, the head of all the doctors at the time, he was giving an example of like how they break it out and how like we mapping onto that basically.
Right, and that is used as what he calls, this is an analogy. It's a surface level distinction because underlying it is unity. We're just using that as an analogy or metaphor to describe different function of the soul.
Well, correct. And when you give an example, the light analogy is like, right, I have the moon, I have the sun, and I have a candle, right? So they're all
Right.
light. However, they're all different, right? So we could use one term. He says how, the doctors could use the word nefesh, but we shouldn't get confused with their terminology, which is like we could use a term in many different ways. Nevertheless, underlining there's still the illumination, the illumination element, which is the
Right.
unifying element between them both.
Yeah.
Between all three of them.
And then specifically the 5 parts of the nefesh that the Rambam talks about: the mezin, the nurturing one, the margish, the senses, the imagination, the mitorer, the emotional, and the sichli, the intellect.
Right, and we said that was divided into, right, the theoretical and the practical.
Right.
Okay, good. Is that it?
No, we have a little bit more. Two other things. Form. We talked about form and matter, right? About the idea of the soul being the form of
the soul. Right, correct.
Inside the body. So trying to map that also analogy to it. And also intellect is the soul's form. So even within the soul, talking about the intellect itself, or that level that we were talking about, the sichli being something that gives the soul its essence.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of just a holistic approach, as this was something that Rambam talks about, and how we want to use, or take advantage of all the parts, or be aware of all the different parts of our nefesh that can lead us to a complete service of God.
And in a certain sense, I'd even say intellectually, like this is sort of like in the afterlife also, which is if I reach that divine space, this divine intellect, then in theory I'm connected to the system. I'm connected back to the source. And at that point, in a certain sense, I've reached immortality, right? Because I'm aware of the everything and my connection to the everything, and I'm now fully connected all the way back to the source. And while there's obviously elements or parts of me that will no longer live on, there's another part of me that I'm very aware. If I could be aware of how I'm connected to the source, then I live on, basically.
Right.
Okay. I know time is of the essence. I still thought that was
no, this was good.
Yeah. Okay.
So let me.
Okay, and then I said we were going to talk a little about well, first of all, I don't know if you want to bring up the second parak.
Yeah, I can bring that up.
Okay. In the meantime, we'll just discuss quickly the differences between Maimonides and the Kabbalists in general. We're not a specific one. So there's the terminology, which we alluded to a little in the beginning with our little breakdown just on the term nefesh. But neshama, right, according to the Rambam, is really, it's a natural component within humans, and the Kabbalists believe that the neshama is a part of like a more complex spiritual system. While neshama could be at the lowest point, which is level, which is already touching up against with the natural, nevertheless, he sees like this divine element to it. And while you could, if you push Rambam to a corner, there too, you could also say it all stems from one source. Nevertheless, he is still giving a more naturalistic explanation to the nefesh.
Right.
There's the nature of nature and divine itself, two of these like concepts, right? So Rambam sees that the lower nefesh, right, the soul, is natural, like we were saying, and the intellect is already divine. We've already spoke about how there's two different intellects that Rambam talks about, but we're talking about here the divine intellect. And the Kabbalists believe that the nefesh and the intellect, they emanate from each other, right? So like it's a play working together, and it's reflecting a continuous divine source. Again, all of it's unified, while the Rambam is much more with regards to these separations. There's the historical context between both of them, right? So obviously, Maimonides is very influenced by Plato, right, which is doing this separation of nature and divine at the time. And there's also the unified experience, right? So this is sort of during the time of prophecy, right? So there's different aspects of the world are experienced as unified, and God's presence is like evident in the world. So again, there's like, you're talking at the end of prophecy where we could see this unification and sort of obvious, right? So, which is also why you didn't really have, it was less about people speaking, let's say, Lashon Hara during the first temple. It was more about their issues still with idol worship, just because they were so in tune with the natural forces in a certain sense. But that allows them to realize the unification in all things. And obviously after the destruction and after the destruction of the temple, once you start hearing already, the philosophers, they start talking about this separation, right? So it was also spoken about philosophically, and we also felt it from a religious jargon and language that we see inside the Bible, that we have to deal with that happening. And you and I have spoke about this often about Rabbi Yaakov in Ethics of Our Fathers, in Pirkei Avot. We have the analogy about seeing your life as a vestibule, right, as a foyer. Right? So all this works because the light that I open up from the great hall shines through to the foyer, because they're all part of one room, right? And that's also, if that's my aspect and that's my mind, the way I look at things, then also me stopping to see a tree is beautiful, right, is all part of one big thing. And that's why I wouldn't be prohibited from doing that. Just to touch about the prophecy, post-prophecy situation, which is, again, after the prophecy leaves the separation, the distinction between nature and the divine, it becomes like a lot more clear. And it's sort of, an example would be, let's say, how you experience like love sort of in this world. If you're in love with someone, you feel like a one unit, and then like I see no sort of separation between me and my wife. But in difficult times when we're arguing, right, then I experience separate realities.
Right. There's like the other person, you feel like they have a perspective that is completely not shared with you. It's outside of what you understand about the world.
Nachon. And right, so again, and the destruction of the temple really shifts the focus from the experiential, the more like embodied, to the intellectual, really understanding God, right? We spoke about this in the intro, which is the philosophers in Judaism had to use intellectual tricks really to try to start scratching and going back to what was experienced during the time of prophecy, right? So we're just alluding to that with intellectual moves, so to speak. And another major difference that we spoke about would be, again, like the world to come, right? So because Rambam sees this separation, right? So a foolish soul, or someone that doesn't work on orienting himself and connecting all the way to the divine intellect, he's erased when it's over, right? There's no divine providence to that kind of person, and he's completely detached. And that's why the soul cannot, let's say, necessarily reach its eternal life, because it's not fully connected and it hasn't been oriented. However, the Kabbalists believe, the divine spark is even in someone like wicked, right? So ultimately, it's all connected back. So even a wicked soul, there's the element in him that our job here is also to try to elevate those things, right? And to rectify tikkun olam, because we believe that ultimately all returns to the source, and the source is divine. So all aspects of him are also divine, obviously. And now, again, there's like sort of a moral superiority with regards to the Rambam view, which says like you must clean your room, you must, you got to take responsibility for your life if you want to have a place in the world to come. You got to actually walk the walk, right?
Yeah.
And I would say the last thing is the mindfulness of the soul itself, right? Which is, as far as like the Kabbalists are concerned, we understand that we recognize that there's dual aspects to our soul, and it could be achieved in different ways. Like there's how Adam achieved it, there's how Moses achieved it, and with the Rambam, his view is more, again, it's more mechanical, that the nefesh is really more of an infrastructure for the neshama, for the soul, and
The Rambam.
mindfulness is not the same. You can't be achieved the same way. Basically, it's like these are two different aspects.
Are you saying the Rambam sees it that way?
The Rambam sees it as the nefesh is just the infrastructure,
right?
And as far as the Kabbalists, they're saying no, the nefesh in a certain way is like dual elements of the soul of neshama as well, right? They're all connected, and one is saying no, this is scaffolding to allow you to discuss the soul, but it's not necessarily. Now again, if you keep on digging there, you'll be like, well, what does that mean? It's infrastructure and it's still touching and related to the soul. So yes, even according to the Rambam, these things ultimately touch, but his framing is a lot more separate.
Right.
All right. Chapter 2. Let's break this down to sections. Can you scroll down for a second? Yes, scroll down a little more if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think this the chapter is shorter.
Until, yeah, what's that? Whatever about? כוחות הנפש, מה שאין כן שאר כוחות הנפש.
כוחות הנפש?
It ends. I'm saying that would be the period. If you go to the top, דש העבירות והמצוות התורתיות.
Whoa, how did I get to 4? That is interesting.
Is Kirk want to come in? Oh, here he is.
I'm here.
Oh, you're here. What's up, dude?
Wait, I thought, Hezi, you're the one who brought me on.
Maybe. No, Ben brought you in.
Okay, so yeah, let me know when to stop. Let's write it. Yeah, but yeah. Okay, that's it. I'll do it in Hebrew first.
Yeah.
דע שהעבירות והמצוות התוריות אמנם יימצאו בשני חלקים מחלקי הנפש, והוא החלק המרגיש והחלק המתעורר לבד, ובשני אלו החלקים יהיו כל העבירות והמצוות. אמנם החלק הזן והחלק המדמה אין מצווה בו ולא עבירה, שאין לדעת ולבחירה באחד משניהם מעשה כלל, ולא יוכל האדם בדעתו לבטל מעשיהם או למעטם מפעולה אחת. הלא תראה ששני החלקים האלה, רוצה לומר הזן והמדמה, יעשו בעת השינה מה שאין כן בשאר כוחות הנפש. אך החלק השכלי...
No, let's stop there.
כוחות הנפש, right.
Okay, so let's do it in English.
Concerning the transgressions of the faculties of the soul and the designation of those faculties, which are the seat of the virtues and the vices, the mitzvot and the avirot. Know the transgressions and observances of the law have their origin only in 2 of the faculties of the soul, namely the sensitive, which I think we also call it the nourishing one, and the appetitive, and that to these 2 faculties alone are to be ascribed all transgressions and observances. The faculties of nutrition and imagination do not give rise to observance or transgression. For in connection with neither is there any conscious or voluntary act. That is, man cannot consciously suspend their functions, nor can he curtail any one of their activities. The proof of this is that the functions of both these faculties, the nutritive and imaginative, continue to be operative when one is asleep, which is not true of any other of the soul's faculties. Did I pass it too? Yeah, I did. Okay. You're muted, Chezi.
sorry, there's a lot here.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I say this every class. Like we're always going to jump into like talking about a topic, then go back from it, then we'll discuss it like a little more because it comes up according to like the Rambam, and in some topics he discusses more. But we need to discuss a little sort of the what our capability is also for like choice or free will, right? With regards to like again, like just underlining this kind of conversation, which is like which part of the nefesh actually has the free will, right? Or all parts have it, and like because only from those parts, based on what we just said in the earlier class, only from those parts could we actually demand moral behavior, right? Now we decided that like we get it that it's all unified, great.
Yeah.
But are we saying it's all unified in all of them I have free will in every element of these, or is it just some? Because those some are the ones I need to identify, right? And the physiological one, it doesn't count because it's not really relevant to a good and evil world, right? It's more mechanical, right? So if I you might have given this example already. If I start drinking something, right? Once I started doing that, my body's going to swallow it. Right? That's not me deciding, oh, I'm swallowing now. My body then goes into this automatic physiological mode. And I don't have choice really about that. So yes, I chose to eat something. But from that point on, it's already on automatic. Right? So I'm saying, so your free will over there, again, would be about eating, but the physiological element, wouldn't be where you would have your free will necessarily. And while we're going to discuss more about this in chapter 7 or 8, chapter 8, we still have to figure out how, like, in today's world, there's this question, right, which is nature and nurture, right? So are the external forces shaping my behavior, right? So where I was born and my culture and my education and my genetics. So, like, is it true to say that there's, it's a question about freedom. Like, how much of it is my own will and how much is sort of imposed around me, like, and we've seen this in 1,000 movies. Like, I knew you were going to open up that door because, like, when you were 5 years old, you slipped, and that the chain reaction is like obviously that's what needed to happen.
Right, and getting that wrong is dangerous because if a person thinks that they have more control than they actually do, this is one issue. But if somebody thinks they have more control than they actually do, they can get very surprised, depressed by results that they did not expect.
Kirk, you hanging in there?
Yeah. I have a question. It's sort of related, but not directly.
What is God? No. Yes.
Do you know of any Jewish theological scholarship on Gilles Deleuze? Because a lot of his discussion does revolve around like free will and desire and
Not off the top of my head. The name definitely sounds like familiar, but I can't tell you off the top of my head.
Okay, yeah, I was just asking because a lot of what he discusses seems to be sort of similar to what's talking here about, like making choices in your environment, but
right. If you find anything good about that, feel free to send us a link. So, okay, so then there's a conversation of like will, right? Like my ratzon. Also is a question, which is like choice ultimately at its core is the expression of the human will.
Right.
Let's try to break that down a little. It's like it's me making a choice is really, it's rooted in the willpower I have of the specific person I am. So like whenever I make a choice, it's really reflecting like my inner motivations and my decisions, right? So like the choice is actually the will I wanted to do to cause it, right? So it's you could reverse it. You could say that through will, I could actually manifest a freedom of choice, right? Because I need to will something and then I could actually make that decision. As in without will, the concept of freedom also to choose doesn't exist, because if I wouldn't have the motivation to make choices. You with me? Like again, so like the ratzon in a certain sense has to happen first.
Right, has to feed into your actions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, this is where it gets complicated because we also, I mean, you said about like once I'm digesting something, then I can't, like my body just does that. But let's say if you're digesting a piece of cake, a very fat piece of cake, then true, well, once you eat it, it's going to be digested and it's going to do what it's going to do to your body. So for that, you have less control about. but you bringing that cake into your mouth was part of your control. So how do you,
for sure? So
right? And I have less subtle examples, but it just comes to mind. I mean, I just like in terms of the Kohen on Yom Kippur, right? Like something can happen during the night that he can control, or can he control? So those. So those are things that are linked. So it's hard to separate them.
right. So that's why the question that follows is which part of the nefesh is will, is ratzon? Which part of the nefesh has that? Because then again, I have to like just like your question, how am I morally deciding to frame this right now? Right? Like is like where's the dividing line? Where it's like, oh, this is like we know, okay, the physiological is out, but where do we draw that line? Right. So it would make sense for us to say that where could we find the nefesh? In theory, we could say, where can we find the will, the ratzonis of the nefesh? We would find that in the emotional, in the mitorer, right? Because this is the part that we says that we work on our merits and like our emotional development.
Right.
And if you remember in the first chapter, we spoke about Rambam says this is like the koch that someone wants, and he's going to figure if he wants something or doesn't want something. However, I would say that's would be like our knee-jerk reaction, but there too we need to notice, and Rambam is very specific about these things, where he's not mentioning who decided. He just is like articulating the emotional feeling during that act, right? So the Rambam in chapter 1 is talking about like I have in the emotion in the koach hamitorer, I could decide if I could. It's what emotionally I'm feeling, not that I decided to do that. So I would say you could call this will, but a better word for that would be desire. And when Rambam is talking about will / choice, right? He's speaking about the ability to decide how to act based on external factors and not based on the emotion. Like, because we could say in today's language, like based on my emotion, I'm also making those kind of decisions. But again, living in Rambam's world for a moment, that's not how he's looking at it. It's only about you're making a decision based on external forces. I'm controlling my emotion right now, and I'm deciding this sort of more like a computer, so to speak.
Right. Yeah.
And so on that focus, right, that like I'm looking at a computer, then I could say, okay, so the will is in the intellect, in the sechel, again, not the divine intellect, which is something else. This is like in my portion of the nefesh, which is the intellect. Yeah. But here too, the intellect is more about the ability to plan. It's less about the choosing, as in once the choice was made, then the intellect kicks in and starts planning. So
it's before the choice. Wait,
I'm sorry?
You're saying the intellect is before the choice? Or is
it's the initial, it's the, according to the Rambam, it's the initial stage in a certain way, which like what's the word they use? Like a tipa, like a drop, but really more like a reflection, right? So the human intellect is a reflection, a very like, very far removed reflection of the divine will, right? Of the Ratzon Elohi. And when divine freedom sort of takes its formal characterization, right? Like when it actually builds itself a form, it becomes the source of an individual personality. So let's give an example. I will say that Ratzon Elohi, the divine will, is the knowledge of everything, okay, in the world. We know that's also still not even close to enough to encompass God, but for all intents and purposes, it's all the knowledge in the world. Yeah. Right? So we understand that this knowledge it's finite, and it's not finite. It's infinite. Useful and practical. I need to actually start structuring it and present it in a way that I can actually understand it and apply it. So this is where like a formal characterization comes in, right? So if it seems like that will is not part of the nefesh, rather, again, like will allows us to unify the 5 parts of the nefesh. So man's will allows him really to activate or not. Like I can activate my nefesh and portions of it, and since we believe as Jews or Christians, that free will is real, then we must say that nothing makes man want except for his will. Am I making sense, or do we need to go over that again?
Nothing makes man want except for his will. Right.
Because we believe that free will is real, right?
Mhm.
Let's play where that's where our assumption is already. And we're saying that will is the first thing, right?
Yeah.
So nothing, what makes me want, the first thing is my will.
Yeah.
And we previously discussed like 2 points that are inside like of the existence of man, right? There's like the natural nefesh and there's the divine intellect, and will is located in between them.
Yeah.
That's the connecting thing, which is like there's the divine will, which I'm disconnected for. There's my will, which connects all my, again, like those 5 points through will all the way back to the divine intellect, right?
Yeah.
So it goes all the way back to the idea of nefesh ha'adam echat, right? So this is really pointing out that it's not the sum of the parts, rather it's the unified element. So I could say I, right? So the nefesh is really where man experiences his personality.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think about like that math, you were saying something about someone's making a choice, and I was just thinking about like, again, like sort of like in a math equation, which is like I could choose to look at the equation 1 + 1, right? But once I do that, then I have no more choice. Then it's going to be 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I want to just look at the text again. Can you scroll up a little? Okay, so we have still the parts of the nefesh where choice is located, right? We had like we were talking about, and it's separated sort of to 2 also. There's religious choice, and it says like it starts with, I don't know if you could go to the beginning of this chapter, I don't know if you recognize this word in Hebrew, but hatoratiot, from the Torah, right? That's what it means, like when the Toratiot. So we have straight from the Torah. So these are commandments really that are relate to parts of our nefesh, and it has like a choice component to it, right? So that's why we're commanded, because we can't control it, right? So there's the classic v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, right? Love thy neighbor. That's because I could decide not to love my neighbor, right? However, there is no commandment about controlling your height, because I have no control over that. I can't do anything about that,
Right.
and therefore that would be sort of that would be, again, that's why that's not relevant to mention that. And then there's the natural, right? Which is, are you conscious or are you aware? So the awareness is like a very important factor, definitely also for the Rambam, which is like, because that is when I have the ability to make a decision, right? And it's not considered like an impulse. So like when I'm sleeping, I could be dreaming, but that's not me making a conscious choice. And that's why that would be different between the religious or the natural. You could argue that lucid dreaming is still part of the intellect, and that's not like classic dreaming at that point, because you're sort of aware of what you're doing.
What's lucid dreaming again?
I'm sorry?
What's lucid dreaming again?
Lucid dreaming
Yeah.
is being able to while conscious, sort of doing so. Like some people can really walk around in their dream and have enough control to have a certain amount of awareness within the subconscious.
Okay, yeah, you were just frozen for a second. For some reason, you've been frozen several times.
I'm going to stop my camera. Hopefully it won't be an issue. Okay, Ben, let's continue reading.
Let's do it. So, where are
החלק השכלי.
אך החלק השכלי יש בו מבוכה, אבל אני אומר שיש בזה הכוח גם כן מצווה ועבירה לפי אמונת דעת בטל או אמונת דעת אמיתית, אבל אין בו מעשה שאומר אליו שם מצווה או שם עבירה סתם, ולזה אמרתי למעלה שבשני החלקים ההם יימצאו העבירות והמצוות.
One more line, אמנם.
אמנם המעלות הם שני מינים, מעלות המידות ומעלות שכליות, וכנגדם שני מיני הפחיתיות.
Exactly. Let's stop there.
Okay.
And let's just say, hi, Gilad.
Hi.
Here we have frequencies of nutrition.
Right, so this is where we basically covered the 4 parts of the nefesh, and like now the question is also like about like the 5th in a certain way, the sichli. But let's read it in English.
I think this one. I think it starts here.
Oh, because the English is like
English. Yeah. As regards
the
rational faculty, uncertainty prevails among philosophers, but I maintain that observance and transgression may also originate in this faculty, insofar as one believes a true or false doctrine, though no action may be designated as an observance or a transgression results therefrom. Consequently, as I said above, these 2 faculties, the sensitive and the appetitive, alone really produce transgressions and observances. And just to continue here, and now as for the virtues, they are of 2 kinds, moral and intellectual, with the corresponding 2 classes of vices.
All right. Right, so we're talking about the 5th run right now. And, right, so there's a question, right? So when I'm sleeping, right, is it working, right? Is my chelek hasichli working? Yeah. And this question, like, it made also like sort of philosophers in a certain way like feel uncomfortable. Like, where is this all coming from? And now Rambam is mentioning over here, right? So he's not really nervous about that. So Rambam has a term called a sechel mechayev, right? So the translation would be like the rationale obligates you or obliges you, or the intellect obligates you. And this is really meaning that you could choose to think about something, but once you can do it, how would I want to say this? Okay, again, I could choose, we said about the ratzon, I could choose to think about something. This was the example we gave with math. But once I do, I'm sort of forced to the conclusions, right? So if I take a math problem, I could choose to play around and decide to open up this math book.
Yeah.
But then the logical answer is inevitable, right? There is free will before the thought, since I choose to think. Right, so this goes back to that point. I choose to participate. Once that thinking goes into motion, assuming I'm a rational thinker, then there's going to be certain things over here that are out of my control, because that is what's going to be the inevitable result.
Right. It's a little bit like it's just less. This is like telling somebody about, like, if you choose to go to a bar, the probability that you will have a drink or get into some kind of interaction that is prevalent in a bar, then it rises. So it is your free will to go there once you're there. Yeah.
Right. So now you could argue, right? So this would mean if it's logical to believe in God, then inevitably I'm going to believe in him. And then I don't really have a choice in the matter, right? And that would be sort of awkward, because how am I doing that then? Because I'm being given this free will, right? So we could see that both in philosophers and Chazal, could still have different conclusions that are still coming from the same logic, right? Ultimately, I forgot who said this, but that every philosopher has his own like core beliefs about this world and his own intuition, which is what he's trying to bring through his words, right? That he has his one thing that he thinks, and everything else he's saying is trying to manifest this idea ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's.
I wanted to maybe.
Please.
Add on the, I think as far as I understand the Rambam's point, it's not so much something that would be more prevalent, like going to a bar. I mean, I think maybe a better analogy is like, if you choose to go into a stampeding crowd, then like you went in, but now like you're going with that. Like there's less of a matter of prevalence. It's like la raison oblige. It means like you are now within the part that is extremely forceful at you.
Right.
In that sense, like when you read the math question. Like you can't go and say like, no, I think 1 + 3 = 5, right? Like you can't go back from that. Like once that there's a path, and then you've chosen to embark on it, but now this path is binding.
It's good we have Gilad over here. So I'm gonna play with you for a second, Gilad, with your mind, if you don't mind. We're going to use you for our consciousness congress for a minute, or you'll participate in our mind palace, right? So okay, so based on what you were saying right now, there's basic axioms, right? So we have like a thought system or a philosophical system, and which will be, let's see, again, like an organized set of ideas or principles, right? Which, have like a coherent framework of understanding. And that's how I'm looking at the world. Now, you'll correct me if I'm wrong about this, Gilad. In Euclidean geometry, right, there is axioms that weren't actually proven, right? But they're just like self-evident, right? So you have like the triangle postulate, right? Which is like you're going to have on 180 degrees, on, again, if it's on a flat surface, but, and this is where I could be wrong, in elliptic geometry, if it's curved, that's not the case.
Okay, yeah. Like if you're not in Euclidean geometry, then Euclidean rules don't apply. That's true.
Yes, but as far as like the triangle postulate though was coming and saying like this is right, like we were choosing to accept a self-evident truth. We didn't like that's not necessarily true, but we believe this is what's true, and we're going to live our life based on this.
Well, what I would say is, I think at least as far as I understand the philosophy is like we're choosing to accept that these postulates are true or self-evident, axiomatically, right. Which means when I think there are two ways to consider that. Axiomatically means cannot be doubted, but axiomatically also means let's play this game.
Right.
So it's not necessarily saying like this must be true, because a lot of math throughout all of its history,
right.
Is like we're going to accept this and see where this leads us.
Right. So this wouldn't be the Rambam, but again, just sneaking in some Kabbalah over here. This would be, let's say, Keter, which means Ratzon is before Bina, right? Is like, and which is like the Sechel in a certain sense, which is again like there's sort of the will for me to accept this axiom. I'm going to play this game, and now that I played this game, then other things are, there's ramifications and implications from that decision, right? So the Rambam is really claiming that you could have moral demands from the intellect, right? Because it's based on your choice of different elements, right? And those are going to affect different conclusions the intellect gets to. And that's why the Rambam feels comfortable, like we said earlier, Ben, when we were trying to feel like, where do I place this moral demand? I could do it on the intellect because there's a Ratzon. And this is why, in theory, I could demand that a Jew change his conclusions regarding, let's say, anthropomorphism, right? So there's a sense where, and the Rambam talks about this, which like, he says like the layman basically needs to depend on the rabbis, but that's not the ideal. The ideal is that like, because someone could will to think about something in a certain way, and we know that thinking about things the wrong way, as in there's been generations upon generations of people thinking like, oh, there's a man in the sky. So the Rambam says, listen, for the layman, like he'll just have to depend on the rabbi. Definitely at his time, 900 years ago, depending how intellectual people were. But ultimately, he says the ideal is for people to dig deeper, search deeper, and come to more proper realizations. And by doing so, I could demand they do that as well. So as someone gets older, I could start having a conversation with my son about like, okay, we had a story about Adam and Eve, and now we're going to have another story about Adam and Eve. And that's not just because like I'm trying to prepare you, quote unquote, for the world. It's because I truly believe that as you get older, and Gilad, this goes all the way to our side conversation, let's say that YouTube clip of Rabbi Goldberg speaking, which he says like, that's not what they're really learning, right? Like really that's the Torah they're engaging with is not actually the Torah that one should be engaging with. And according to the Rambam, going to, let's say, the ultra-Orthodox would be, you have a moral demand of them to like now like upgrade and phase shift into like a better version of understanding so you could reach better conclusions, because so far your conclusions have led you to, you know, not serving in the army, for example. Right. So
I think this
sorry, go ahead.
this is coherent with his views on studying Torah in for the sake of Olam Haba. He says that's like a kid who does his homework for candy, right? You should it should all be lishma. And if you're doing this because you think this is going to reward you in the world to come, then you are not doing it for the right reasons. And that's I think it coheres with that analogy where he says, as a kid, right, when you're at the lowest spiritual level, that's acceptable, but we should never settle for that. Right?
Correct.
It's like if you're still, as you know, an adult doing that, or is it like if you've spiritually matured, let's say, you're still doing that, that's like a kid who still wants to get candy every time you wash the dishes or something.
Right. Now there's like, as we read in Pirkei Avot, there's certain, let's say, cheats, or let's say hacks, basically, which is like, regardless, the rabbis say, like, if you learned, regardless, you still have a portion, you still have a this, right? People were very, I mean, this happens, you know, in many generations, but, you know, Maimonides comes out and that's too much for the people to handle, right? So they say like, well, let's calm that down. And when the Baal Shem Tov and Ramchal comes out, like, right, like, he mentions this also in the video with Rabbi Goldberg, right? They were kicked out into the field, kicked out of their house, saying like, you know, you're not part of us anymore. And then later on, we're like, oh, that's what we all do, and that's what our prayer book is made out of. So
it's Rabbi Gottlieb. Just his name is Rabbi Gottlieb.
Or was I saying Goldberg? Sorry, Gottlieb. You're right. Okay, so let's give another example of. One second, Kirk, are you with us?
I'm with you guys.
Okay. Let's give another example of let's say faith and heresy, right? Being a kofer, not pikoros, right? So, another axiom that could change your mindset would be revelation, right? So someone who hadn't heard of revelation will obviously have a very hard time believing in a revelatory God, because he has to sort of break through his mental frame to believe that's true. And now I would say, like, philosophers, generally speaking, see God sort of as mute, and he's also that's also like a limiting understanding of God. He's like sort of the first intellect, or God is sort of nature, sort of in the Spinoza sort of way. And but that philosopher is never going to know God as someone as Misha Diber ve'amar olam, right? Someone who spoke and the world was actually created, as we pray, because that's not his experience at all. That's not his mindset. And that person is called an apikoros, right? It's called a heretic, right? Because he believes the world is automatic. It's just running in the way it's supposed to run right now, and there isn't this even you could say we've advanced at the time, philosophers talking about like an unmoved mover or these ideas, still they're talking about this mute God. And we have to realize that it's natural to us, but not faith in God, right? Like what's natural to us, we spoke about this earlier, Ben, is the power of nature, faith in the power of nature, which is like avodah zarah, right? Foreign worship, because it's a real powerful religious relationship and it's with the powers of the world. But we realize that's not really where we're supposed to be oriented. And of course, we see that in the temple, where we take all these elements of blood and incense and all these mother nature elements, and we're trying to orient them properly, right? So once Sinai happened, this changes the whole paradigm, right? And it forces everyone in the world to think differently. And I would say even after the Hebrew prophets, once their words are spread all over the world, even the philosophers start to discover the transcendental God. And again, like what we said, like while they don't speak about like divine providence, right? They're still seeing God from separate from this world. That's like a huge step forward as far as like religious people are concerned with regards to understanding how the world works, right? So if all the people that follow Abraham, and they looked at nature, this is a famous midrash, right? When he was a child, and he says, Yesh Adon Labira, right? There must be a master for this castle. And we should notice that he's not sure that God exists, but by questioning, right, he creates a space. And in that understanding, then there's a space open to understand revelation, right? So what is it in Hebrew? Hitzitz alav bal habira ve'amar lo ani bal habira. Now let's say that specifically again in Maimonides' world, he thinks that Abraham achieves full understanding of God just using his intellect, and that's like very very special, right? Not everyone necessarily gets to do that, which is very hard to do. I believe that's Rambam's take. However, again, you could do a different reading on this, which is not that he fully understood, but more that there was room for questioning, basically.
So what does that room for questioning bring about? You're saying that the room for questioning
is bringing in the revelation, right? We're saying that kind of axiom, which is like, how am I living my life? Am I assuming that just like the 180 degrees when we were talking about the mass? Am I assuming that is this self-evident and I'm going to play this game and there's revelation? But if I'm not willing to participate in that, right? If I'm not willing to create a space to even open myself up to that question, then I'm never going to be able to see that. And then you have someone seeing sort of a mute God because they're not open to the idea that this is a God that spoke and created the world. And again, spoke, I understand that's like a loaded term, but I believe you understand what I mean. Yeah. Okay. Let's continue reading, or yeah, I think we continue reading. I know you have a hard stop at 10.
Yeah, I have a hard stop at I should probably head out actually.
Well, so let's stop over here. Is that there?
I'm good with it. I mean, if you want to continue, I mean, I'm happy that people.
No. I mean, I enjoy doing it. I enjoy doing it with everyone, but we're doing this. We're going through it. We'll go through it properly. It's all good.
Sounds good.
It ends up being, by the way, like these are the shorter chapters. I think like chapter 3, if I recall, is very short. We'll probably do that in one class. Chapter 4 and chapter 5 are very, very long. I'll probably take like 3 classes to do those. So yeah, we'll sit there.
Sounds good.
All right, sir. Take care.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, Ben.
I will. One second. I was thinking about him. And let me try to turn this on again, my camera. All right. So I don't want to move forward because I want to wait for Ben. But Kirk, do you have any questions, thoughts, complaints?
No, I think this is all interesting. I mean, a lot of it is stuff I've already seen from rabbis who are talking about the soul, but it is interesting to go over it. I feel like you and Gilad have a lot to talk about when it comes to the Israel situation, and I don't have much to say there other than we're living in weird times. The one question I do have though is conceptually, I've heard an argument some atheists make, and I would like you to give potentially a Jewish theological response to it, that the existence of God as presented by traditional theistic religions, it's logically impossible because the law of identity states that everything which exists has a nature and identity to it. If God is infinite, then it can't have a specific nature. Therefore, God is logically impossible under the law of identity.
This is a human-made law with a human brain. Right? God is outside these. I love that picture of you off. That God is outside those restrictions.
So you don't believe the law of identity is is a part of the natural universe?
Again, but even the whole universe, these are just like aspects of God ultimately. These are, like I'm saying, it's very like even the conversation we're having right now about like the divine intellect and all these parts of the nefesh, we're just, we're playing around with words ultimately at the end of the day. So as far as like the identity, do you want to use that term on God, identity? I mean, I would say that it's probably more coherent to say that God doesn't exist. But I'm not negating God. I'm just using, as far as terminology that we could be using, that would probably be like the more correct thing to say, because like it doesn't really exist the way we talk about existence. And even God, the name itself is problematic.
I understand. So it's just trying to impose a law like the law of identity on a transcendental being is a category error?
I would think so.
Okay. Yeah, that's understandable.
Yoav, I don't know if you are comfortable with this or not, However, Gilad and I, first of all, I can't stay very long, but Gilad and I have been having conversations around, very loving and caring conversations around Israel,
Is Yoav in
politics,
Israel?
religion. Yes, Yoav is Israeli as well, but I don't know if you feel some people come to this space to like not live in the reality that they're living in right now. So you might decide that like I'm not into that kind of discussion right now.
I actually haven't introduced myself. So Yoav, I don't know if you've seen me on these streams before, but my name is Kirk. I'm broadly a part of TLC, and it's nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Also a satellite of the TLC.
Are you if it's not too personal of a question, are you a religious Jew?
No,
Okay.
I'm belonging to no church at all. I used to live most of my life within the liberal, secular Judaism of North Tel Aviv, and I have been kicked out of that sect. So now floating in space aimlessly.
Why were you kicked out? If I could ask.
This is the story behind the picture, which I told twice. Okay, if you want to discuss the situation in Israel, it fits into the discussion. So I will tell this story yet once again, getting a bit tired and repeating it. The picture you see here, that's the memorial for the fallen soldiers in my neighborhood. We are a neighborhood that was founded at the late 50s by veteran officers of the Israeli army. So lots of people in that generation and following generation served in the Israeli army. Sorry?
No, I was just
You're all good.
Okay. And there are lots of fallen soldiers, which we feel very deeply about. And in the middle of the neighborhood, in the central hill, the neighborhood is sort of laid around this central hill. There is the memorial for the fallen soldiers. And it has been our secular religion ever since I was a baby, that a certain day of the year, the day of, there is a certain day before the Independence Day, in which we
Memorial Day.
Yes, Memorial Day. Then all of the neighborhood at the same hour, 6:30, convene at that memorial, and there is a ceremony that is managed and conducted by, there is a nearby primary school. So it is adjoined to a primary school. So a certain age group of the school every year, they serve the memorial. And there are speeches by dignitaries of the municipality and the neighborhood. And there is a speech by a relative of a fallen soldier. And that has been a holiday. I mean, a day that has been repeated every year, the same day, the same hour, and a certain ceremony that has been changing, with the times. It's not always the same ceremony, and if the kids are singing a song, it's not always the same song, and if the schoolmaster is giving a speech, it's not always the same speech, but it was repeating. That specific year of that picture, you see by the mask on my face, was the year of the plague. And due to the lockdown, nobody came. The ceremony was not conducted. So we deviated from our own religion. And one could justify it if it was an emergency, or if we thought it was an emergency. But what you don't see in the picture that this is also adjoined to a playground. And since it is a holiday and since it's lockdown and nobody goes to work, then everybody's having fun in the playground with their kids. And it's, of course, in Israel, it's a sunny day. And people are just having fun around and never mind the ceremony. That was the point in which I lost my religion. It means that I came. There were two people from the neighborhood that at the allotted time at that place. It was myself and my old mother, who still lives in the neighborhood where I grew up. So she took the picture. And we were left the last ones of our religion, while society has moved on to some other interests. Then a group of female school teachers came, and they were feeling bad about not conducting the ceremony, which was their duty. So they brought a bunch of flowers. And since I was the only man in the group, then I was the one that had to say Kaddish. And as I said, I am completely secular. I don't, as a matter of habit, say any prayer, including the Kaddish. But if I'm the last Jew, then I will say Kaddish on everybody. There's more to this story, which I'm not going to tell. I told it in other opportunities with the TLC. So I'm drifting. I cannot call myself a secular Jew of North Tel Aviv because I do not belong to this religion anymore. They moved on and I stayed behind. So there is a gloomy discussion on the state of Israel that is going to follow from this story, which at this moment of time I do not want to follow. When I was telling my story to our friend Jacob, he said, "Oh yeah, this is why I'm not a Zionist." I am a Zionist. Sorry?
You're good.
I am a Zionist, and there is a limit to how much bad publicity I'm going to give to the state of Israel at this point. I don't feel any particular need to complain at the moment. I'm just waiting for the other boot to drop, figuratively speaking. The reason I came up to the stage, I want to discuss some other issue relating to free choice. But if you are so keen to discuss the grave situation in Israel, then I will not stop you.
You know what?
My subject can wait to some other day.
Unfortunately, first off, Gilad, I still need to read what you sent me. I didn't get a chance yet, but I'll have time tomorrow, and maybe we could also do a stream tomorrow. So I would say let's find time to do our own thing because I'm not gonna have like a long stretch. I need to get off soon. If you don't mind, let's just play a little with Yoav's question.
Okay. Shall I bring up my subject?
Hit us.
Yeah. I'm going to connect two items that we have discussed today. Mathematical axioms or geometrical axioms and choice, the ability of choice. So I'm referring to the axiom of choice. I'm sure that Gilad knows what I'm talking about when I say the axiom of choice. Do you?
Not sure that I do. Maybe it's a terminology thing.
Okay. In geometry, let's say that you are following a proof in geometry.
It's the first AOC.
First, what?
AOC. Axiom of choice, just as far
Yes.
as the acronym.
Okay, so imagine that you are following a proof in geometry, and it starts with an infinite line, which has an infinite number of points, and you choose one of the point at random. You choose one of the point at random, and from that you are drawing another line, and then the proof goes on, and you go on drawing more lines and more circles until you prove whatever you wanted to prove. That step of choosing a point on a line, it's an axiom that you are actually capable of doing it. I mean, you cannot derive it from anywhere else. And then, so mathematics now splits into two. There is the branch of mathematics that they would say, yes, of course, we assume the axiom of choice, and we go on and build the mathematics on top of it. And there is an alternative mathematics who said, well, in its infinite line, with infinite number of points, whenever you are trying to concentrate on a certain point in order to choose it, then infinite number of points will emerge below it. So no matter how much time you're going to toil over this task of choosing, you will never be able to choose. You will never get actually to choosing a point on a line. So that is the issue of the problem of choice as an axiom of geometry. So I describe it. Is there anything that you would like to say about that subject?
I guess I can start. First of all, hi, Yoav. It's nice to meet you. I think in general, you could say something like there's a lot of ways that you can prove that there's sort of a hole at the center of mathematics, and there's many different philosophers and mathematicians that have discussed this over the years. I guess my own version of that hole, which is something related to your infinite line, so it came up, is like if we assume that we use infinity, let's say in physics, because I'm a physicist, in our consistent way, then you would have to ask if the universe truly is infinite in time, right? It let's say started from the Big Bang and then it goes on indefinitely, and before that, like say there was nothing, or more importantly after that, at some point there's like the heat death of the universe or whatever it is that ends everything. Then mathematically it means there is the chance to randomly choose a point that has anything is zero, because it doesn't matter how long the existence of the universe is, it is zero compared to infinity. And every that's related to, in physics, the I think it's called the anthropic principle, something like that. That some physicists, especially in particle theory, ascribe to. That it's like we should only consider theories that would allow such a universe in which we can consider theories, right? So like that's why the universe is fine-tuned. But I think to answer the point after this maybe aside, I guess what I would say about that is the language in mathematics, I think, is included within the realm of languages, is a very limited tool for us to try to understand things. And the marvel of mathematics is not that it's innately complete and always true, but the fact that it's so immensely revelatory, beautiful, and useful. Does that get to your point?
You say that the axiom of choice is irrelevant to the real world, since the real world is not infinite. That's the first point you're making. It's an exercise. It's not relevant to physics.
Yeah, but I'm not saying exactly that. I'm saying that whatever it is that you assume mathematically, if you take any set of axioms and you push them to the edges, this is famous with group theory, which is also purely mathematical, it becomes paradoxical. Like there is no version of maths that doesn't have paradoxes. There's no version where everything is nice and neat. So what I'm saying more precisely is I believe that is a paradox. I just don't think that the existence of paradoxes and evidence that our theories are incorrect makes it any less interesting, beautiful, and fruitful to look into them.
Fine. So I was bringing this subject up in this discussion because I want to ask the question, never mind physics, is what I have, the issue that I have raised, does it have any theological implications?
Well, you were arguing or positing that there is no choice because ultimately I realize that like anywhere I put the dot, right, is I still think that I still think that I'm still buying into the game, being aware that the dot I'm putting, even though once I'm aware of what you're mentioning, Yoav, once I'm aware of that, and I still decide to participate, is there not choice by doing that?
Fine. Do you want me to go on? Because I can go on this line of thought.
You can, yeah, I have a few more minutes.
Okay, so I want to talk about Jacob's ladder because we are with this frame of Jacob's ladder. What is Jacob's ladder? Against it's mathematically. You're lying there on the ground, so you're firmly grounded in reality, and you're looking up. And what you're seeing is a ladder. A ladder is the discrete infinity. It's not a fireman's pole in which angels are sliding. It is composed of discrete steps. So I'm making the theological point that Jacob's ladder it's infinite, of course, because if you want to climb it, then you have to walk infinite number of steps. But it is the discrete infinity, it's the countable infinity, okay, which is different than the infinity in which I was talking before. And now, say that I am feeling virtuous and I want to start climbing the ladder, okay? Mm-hmm. So, first thing I have to do is to know, to have a distinction between up and down. And I would assume that as a son of man, I have the capacity, even if I make mistakes, on the average, I will, if my aim is to go up, I will go up more than I will go down. But even this assumption is unnecessary because mathematically speaking, even if I don't know up from down, given infinite time, I will get there to infinity. But so the theological claim here is that mankind, the chain of father and son, if given enough time to go on to infinity, will at infinity reach God. However, I'm not sure that the measure of God is the countable infinity. If the measure of God is the uncountable infinity, then even after infinite steps of improvements, we will still not get there. Now I'll have to give you time to digest it, because I just put a bombshell on the table. I don't know where it leads, and I'm just putting it on the table and walking away.
Well, first off, I mean, I appreciate the perush, right? I'm saying you're obviously playing nicely with these ideas of the ideas of the going up and down. Excuse me for a
What does
second.
Perush mean?
My
Interpretation.
interpretation. Excuse me for a moment.
Gilad? This was somewhat
Yeah.
relevant to your earlier point. Do you know of any mathematicians who solved Bertrand Russell's paradox?
Which paradox? Bertrand Russell?
Bertrand Russell's?
It's a paradox, and I don't think it's solvable. I mean, it's the way that you're talking about the group theory one, right?
Well, basically, Bertrand Russell's paradox is in set theory, or I guess you could say group theory, but it's
Theory,
about
set theory. I might be mixing it up because I know it in Hebrew, and I don't always know the translation. The set of all sets or something. The paradox. Well,
Gentlemen, I'm sorry, I gotta go. However, I have no problem leaving this stream, and don't worry about it. I don't know if Kirk, you don't have. No, you can't. So I'll end it. I'll check on it in
Wait,
like an hour. Or so.
one final question before we go. It's quick, and it's
Yeah.
simple, I promise. Do you guys have any plans to out the Kahanists in the government?
No one here is in favor of those jokers. Please God, we'll be able to build a coalition of level 100 people. But yes, Kirk, you don't have to worry about that over here. That's not our cup of tea. Anyways, I'm out. All you guys have a fantastic night. Continue to feel free to talk, and I'll shut it out later. Catch you guys later. Sorry.
Okay, bye.
I think I'll go soon as well. But it was nice meeting you, Yoav, and nice seeing you as usual, Kirk. So
It was nice seeing you too. What does you? I'm curious, Yoav. What do you do professionally, or are you retired?
I'll show you.
Is this an octopus?
Yes, it's a plastic octopus, and it comes out of a printer. It's a 3D printer in color. I'll show you some other stuff.
So you do 3D printing?
Let me just.
What's that supposed to be?
It's a mechanism. It's a machine.
I see. So you sell 3D printed objects?
I'll just show you some other stuff. If the camera catches it.
It's like a box?
It's a semi-transparent box. No. Okay, here it is.
Yeah.
So I work for a company that builds the machine and the ink. And it's unique in that it prints in real color. Apart from printing any shape, it also will print it in any color.
I see. So you work for a 3D printing company?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm gonna head out, but I understand the situation in Israel with Netanyahu and recently with Donald Trump potentially getting elected in America has been very divisive. It's not an issue I know much about, but I do know that it's been getting weird recently since October 7th, and with the a lot of the pro-Palestinian protesters.
I think I was very clear about me not wanting to discussing this
I
matter
know.
today.
I understand. Maybe another day. Will you be here next week?
I usually attend this whenever I can, or some other TLC discussions. I'm
Well,
almost retired, so I have lots of spare time.
Well, maybe you'll be in the mood to talk about it then.
Usually I go into a discussion if I have something clever to say. Just to lament my bad fortune and say how awful things are and how awful things are going to turn out. If I don't have any special angle on it, then I probably will stay out.
I understand. Well, anyway, I think I'm gonna head out about that, but it was nice seeing you, Av.
Yeah, nice talking to you too.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye.